Hey, Matt,
Hey, Ryan.
I want to knit you a sweater.
Oh, you want to knit me a sweater?
Yes, I do, sir.
Is it because
And,
is it because we're coming up on Christmas?
yeah, exactly. And I'm feeling a little blue right now.
Subtle, subtle, love it.
And yeah, welcome back, everybody. This is a podcast called Hey, Listening to This. My name is Ryan Kearns.
I'm Matt Durzik.
And on this podcast, we go over albums track by track. Every week, either Matt or I will pick a specific album for various reasons. It could be just, hey, never really listened to this album. I wanted to, explore it. Or, hey, like, I feel like, the other hosts would be really into this album, or I'm curious to see what they're going to say. So this week, we're talking about Joni Mitchell's Blue, and this was Matt's choice of an album to listen to.
Yes, it was my choice of album to listen to because in the last episode we were talking about the album Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers and about how it was a very stripped down, sort of isolated confessional type of record. And one of the albums in my thought process of, should I suggest this? I ultimately ended up going with Big Thief of my legitimate suggestion, but Blue would have been the next one down. And at the end of the episode, I was thinking, has Ryan actually heard that album before? And I asked you right on the episode, saying, have you listened to Blue? You had said no, and I was like, cool, that's our next episode then. So one thing I'll mention at the start is that this album is critically acclaimed, but apparently it's more critically acclaimed than I even given it credit for. Because we have been talking, in past conversations about how I told you that this was ranked, I think, number 30th by Rolling Stone in their original top 500 albums of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was published back in 2003. So I'm thinking, okay, well, where does it rank now? Because they did a revision of the list back in 2020. It's ranked third.
What albums are ahead of it? I'm just kind of curious.
The only two albums ahead of it on the list for 2020 was the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds at number 2, which ironically has been the ranking that it's held through all three lists, by the way. And at number 1 is Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, which on the original list I think was at number 7. Or no. Exile on Main Street was number 7. What's Going On was number 6. So over the course of 17 years, it got bumped up 5 spots. But Blue went all the way from 30th to 3rd. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. So we are really talking about one of those albums, aren't we?
I wonder if it's a case of, well, I don't know. Like, there's could be multiple different vectors about, like, why it jumped up that far. But needless to say, when Blue was recorded, there were certain details in Mitchell's life that were not known to the public, which we'll get to later on in the album. But I wonder, once those details became a little bit more out in the air, that people are like, oh, well, this album is actually probably directly reflecting that experience. So yeah, let's bump it up a couple of spots there.
Perhaps, but I think even if none of that was known, we'll get into it. Let's just say there's a reason that this album is considered one of the best of all time by not just Rolling Stone, but several different publications and fan publications alike.
But it is yet to be reviewed by the legendary podcast, Hey, Listen to This. So we'll see like how Matt and I review it to see if it actually stands up to its salt. Because for those of you who have listened to every single episode, first of all, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and Matt's heart too. But I know I know probably Joni Mitchell's Blues was much more critically acclaimed, but as of the recording of this episode, today we released our Liz Phair episode, and Matt and I were a little bit divided on that. I know Exile in Guyville was highly critically acclaimed, but I personally was not buying any stocks.
And that's fine. You did not have to buy any stocks. It is a free man's economy. It's a free country. You are free to put your musical stock where you feel it should lie. So if you want to buy, several shares of Limp Bizkit, I will not stop you, my friend.
You know what time it is. Oh, man. All right, so enough gibber gabber here. Let's get at her. So, Joni Mitchell's Blue. The first song is called All I Want. And what a cool song, man. Like, it introduces the whole album in such a lovely way.
It really does. It's a very stark arrangement that Mitchell comes up with. And there's really not too much on it except for her and her guitar and her words, which, spoiler alert, is all she's really going to use except for maybe piano and a couple of other things throughout the course of this album. And right out of the gate, she paints this picture of, wanting to be with a guy, wanting, simple things. And the simplest thing she wants is for this lover to cure her blues because she's going through it right now. And one thing I did research in lieu of this album, which is something I'd kind of already known, but just a refresher I looked today, that one of the biggest blues that she was having is that this being her fourth album in her career, and this being in 1971, she really couldn't hide anymore. Like, she couldn't be this sort of underground artist anymore. Like, people had noticed her. People were like, oh, here's this Joni Mitchell. She wrote Both Sides now. She wrote Woodstock. She wrote Big Yellow Taxi, which she recorded for herself. And all of it sort of propping herself up. And with the baggage that we're going to talk about later on, sort of created this perfect storm of, okay, I'm becoming more famous, but with that comes a price. And do I want to pay that price? And so I think that's one of the main issues that she is struggling with, particularly throughout this whole record. And on this song, she's trying to use romance, which she is very good at writing about, to talk about that particular want to get away from herself and to be with someone else. Yeah.
Like, there's so many examples throughout this whole album, man, of how, like, she does this element of, like, if you read it at face value, it could be like, hey, just talking about a story, just talk about, like, love, wanting to, like, shampoo this person, whatever the heck that means, man. I want to knit you a sweater, but like, there's if you even take it in a different kind of spin, like how you were talking about, like how this could be legitimately talking about, like, her relationship with her fans. I mean, like, heck, there's a lyric in here that says, "Oh, I hate you some, I hate you some, I love you some. Oh, I love you when I forgot about me." Like. And, like, even on another flip side about it, this could be talking about America as a whole. Like, just her personal relationship. Like, and it shows, like, how well Joni does, like, write lyrics and deliver songs in such a refreshing way. One thing that I will, constantly talk about in this album, and, like, along with, like, her ability to construct lyrics in such a amazing way, but her vocals, man, holy cow, dude. Like, she sounds like, I might be using the wrong kind of, like, bird, but she legitimately, when she goes up into those, like, that higher register, she sounds like a canary, and I'm absolutely there for it every single time. Like, if you take a peek into my notes on our Google Drive, like, every single note on every single track is Joni Mitchell's vocals. It's basically like how I fell in love with Tina Weymouth in our Talking Heads episode. Like, holy cow, dude. Like, how did I not know about this?
That's an absolutely fair comparison. And you talk about a couple themes in there that, first of all, the fact that she's talking about America in this song, which is not a possibility I had considered, but it is a rather interesting theory, particularly because Mitchell herself is Canadian. And so her view of America is slightly different than it would be for, people who actually grew up here, or, and it's certainly compared to where she was sort of hanging out in sort of the California hills with the likes of, Crosby, Stills and Nash and all the sort of folk rockers of the late 60s and early 70s. That environment, especially in the late 60s, much different than the Canadian upbringing than she had. So that is an interesting observation. But even if you took it at face value about it just being a romance, it's still a very effective track and a wonderful album starter, not just because of her interesting twist on what she wants, but also, like you said, her vocals are just fantastic. And I really can't add much more to it other than, if you like this, you're really going to like where this album's going.
Yeah. So, just to wrap up this album, this track here, I love how she constructs, the verses. So the first verse is basically introducing the concept of, her, just being an independent woman and traveling on this road, looking for, something, not even knowing what it's gonna be. And then in the second verse, it basically has her expressing how she wants her love, how she wants her love to, go. With lyrics of, I want to talk to you, I want to shampoo you, I want to renew you again and again. And then in the third verse, it's showing how, this is how their relationship has progressed with lyrics, the jealousy, the greed is unraveling, it's the unraveling, and it undoes all the joy that could be. So excellent, song progression, excellent way to link all the verses together. But other than that, excellent opening track here.
Agreed. And from that, we head into the second track of the album, which is My Old Man, which takes on a slightly different tone, but not too different. It sort of paints a picture. Basically, it answers the question, what if Joni Mitchell had gotten what she wanted and all I want? Because My Old Man is about a guy who does that. My old man keeping away the blues. He's a singer in a band. He takes care of me, etc., etc., etc. And the biggest change, aside from that, is the fact that now we have switched from guitar to piano, which she plays and is by herself on this track as well. And it's very similar as far as what I could say about this track. Contextually, from what I can recall, I'm not 100% sure, but I know for a fact that she was dating Graham Nash at the time, or sort of in that same time span, so I'm thinking that it might be about him, but I'm not 100% sure about that, and we'll get to who it could possibly be later on down the line. But, on the other hand, even if you didn't know any of that, once again, this song does a good job of painting a picture of Joni, particularly talking about finding joy in this sort of domesticized relationship, which is a pretty bold move considering, this is the early 70s where domesticity, especially in the rock and folk culture, wasn't necessarily seen as a high point.
Yeah. And I feel like with this song, it might do, there's a lyric about, hey, we don't need a piece of paper to tell us, hey, that we are together. So that might be a clever nod to that. But, yeah, not much else I can add on top of that. I mean, Joni Mitchell's vocals, if you've not ever listened to Joni Mitchell and you're listening to this podcast, one, just pause right now and go on to YouTube or whatever, not Spotify again, because this is another artist that's not on Spotify. I was actually able to find her on Pandora, so that being said, pause the pod right now, go listen to her, then come back so you can understand how amazing her vocals are. But yeah, love the piano. Love how Mitchell's vocals really portray the emotions of the highs and lows of domestic bliss. And yeah, I mean, not much else to say. Like, and you can. This is a nice standalone track, but take the opening track "All I Want" and then you go to this next one, "My Old Man," and you can see like a nice progression there. Like there is a story here, but like each song stands independently on their own.
I agree, and I'm glad you brought up the line about not needing a paper from the city, because that is one of the better lines on the album, because it does contrast this feeling of domesticity with not going through all of the domestic rules and regulations that one are usually required to have. So it's basically saying, I'm doing the things you asked me to, I'm just not doing them the way you wanted me to, which is, I think, is a nice touch. Also, talking about where you can listen to this album, I'm pretty sure, because I've looked it up, because I would just like Google Joni Mitchell Blue, as far as, just try to find, certain pages on this. And I'm pretty sure on her own page itself on YouTube is the whole album in full, all 30 some minutes of it. If you want to listen to it there, so that's nice too.
Yeah, the only thing about YouTube that kind of blows a little bit is if your primary listening device is through your phone, like you have to keep your phone screen on if you're listening through YouTube. Otherwise, like YouTube is like, hey, you gotta pay for YouTube Premium, and I'm not paying $15 for YouTube Premium. Get lost, man.
And that is fair. That is fair. Although if you are privileged enough to have, on multiple devices, whether it be like if like for example, I speak mainly just for us, but if you're not in this category, I apologize. You could prop it up on the TV while you're doing something else, like washing the dishes or cleaning the TV room or whatever. You put it up on the TV and make sure your phone's still at handy, so your phone's not burning battery, because your TV doesn't burn battery. It's a TV.
It's plugged into a wall. But getting back to "My Old Man," the only other thing I will mention about this song here is I love the line that she's talking about the bed being too big and the frying pan being too wide. And that could again be given some a little bit of a clever nod to like the highs and lows of domestic life, like the bed being too big, like hey, the security is like it's wide open, and the frying pan being too wide, and that might be her like keeping her eyes, like her head on a swivel, her eyes like behind her, just checking out, making sure like, hey, am I gonna get burned here?
Yeah, that's a legitimate point, and that is honestly a level of anxiety that is very ahead of its time. This thought of, okay, I mean, it's of its time too. I shouldn't, discredit those dealing with anxiety in those times, but certainly now that it's more of a talked about topic, it when it presented like that, because it really wasn't presented much in pop music, that level of anxiety or that level of, is this the right thing that I should be doing? Yeah, that's a great point, Ryan, that having that anxiety is something that a lot of us struggle with, even when the times seem to be at their best.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to, I would say again, I reserve the right to change this later on, but moving on to probably my favorite song off the album, "Little Green."
Little Green. Now, since this is your favorite song, or what you claim to be your favorite song right now, explain why that is, because I'm intrigued to hear.
Okay, so those of you who are keeping intense notes on like what me and Matt are talking about, for one, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and from Matt's bottom of his heart too. However, like I alluded to like a certain fact that came out about Joni Mitchell, like post this album. I think it was like maybe like in the 90s, like this fact came out. But so Joni Mitchell essentially, whenever like in her younger life, she got pregnant. couldn't keep it, and she had to give it up. And like since then, she's reconnected with his daughter, and like they've lived a happy like mother daughter life. But Little Green is essentially about this. Like it's funny whenever I listen to this song, like the first time without even knowing the context, like I easily picked it up because I was just like, oh yeah, this song's basically about a child who's put up for adoption due to the parents not being ready. Um, and like just a nice sincerity behind the vocals, and it's a very very intimate song. And the fact that I heard about like, hey, this is actually based on a true story, and how Joni was basically spilling her guts out into this song. Holy cow, man! Like easily probably one of my favorite songs off the album.
I'm right there with you. It's definitely one of my favorites too. I wouldn't quite put it at number one on this album. We'll get to which one is later. But I'm right there with you, and I really can't. You did a fantastic synopsis of what makes this song special. I'll add to it that the details to which of how Joni had to give up her child. If you are guys are into books, one about Joni Mitchell along with Carly Simon and also Carole King. It's called Girls Like Us, that dives into sort of a cross pattern of their careers as they all sort of rose to prominence in the early 70s. I would very highly recommend reading that. It does get into some rather sensitive topics, this being one of them. But if you're okay to stomach that, go through with that. And the other thing I'd like to add to this is that you mentioned it being an intimate setting. I also praise Joni for having the sense to make it somewhat restrained as far, because let's be real, if you wanted to get as raw as you could about the loss and giving up or the sacrifice of something you created, especially a child, it could have sounded very, very much rawer and confessional, and it probably would have sounded more honest, but it wouldn't have sounded nearly as approachable. It wouldn't have sounded as relatable. By comparison, around the same time, about a year earlier, John Lennon was doing something like that on his first solo Beatles album following the breakup, which is Plastic Ono Band, where he was getting into a lot of like primal therapy stuff, screaming and everything. And even then, he sort of restrained it to at least a musical format. I would say that Joni does that even one further, refurbishing it to a point where anyone could listen to this and not feel like they might feel sad and somber, but they're not going to feel like pushed away or like there's any sort of violence towards them. It's a very comforting song for a very uncomforting subject.
Yeah. And even to wrap this discussion about Little Green up with a bow there, talk about it's a sad song, but it's not a kind of push you away song. It's just like, hey, like we can all kind of relate, but you're not ashamed about these feelings. Like there's like my favorite set of lyrics that basically kind of spells out Joni's mindset during this time. Child with a child pretending, weary of lies you're sending home, so you sign all the papers in the family name. You're sad and you're sorry, but you're not ashamed. Little Green, have a happy ending. So that's basically Mitchell being like, hey, like, I'm not ready. I'm sad, but I'm not ashamed for what I've done and what I'm doing. And I'm wishing this child to have a great life. And, it might be a incredibly minor detail, but I'm going to point it out anyway. So this song's called Little Green. There's a couple tracks down, we're going to come across the title track, Blue. I don't know if it's a well-known fact, but kind of like an awkward fact that I discovered about Joni Mitchell herself is that I don't know what the exact term is. She's not colorblind. She's maybe color deficient, where she might not be able to see colors in the correct way, but she's not technically colorblind. But the way that she's able to use colors to express emotions and just her way to really tell stories, all props to her. She's an excellent singer-songwriter for that.
Absolutely. Again, I applaud her arrangement, her vocals. I mean, this really is a fantastic, fantastic, fantastic song. One that, tugs at your heartstrings but at the same time is so comforting. It would be my favorite song on the album, but we'll get to which one is later on.
All right. Is it the next song, Carey?
It is not. It is not Carey. But I do like this song a lot, too. And this is probably the most upbeat song on the album. And it also is the most not lonely song on the album. Not just because of the romantic part of it, but also because there are other musicians on this track, which you can't really say that about too many other tracks on this album. But this one, I believe, has James Taylor on guitar, Stephen Stills on bass, and Russ Kunkel on drums.
Ooh, Rusty Kunkel on the drums, baby. Let's go.
Do you even know who Russ Kunkel is?
No, but that's $1 million name.
He's actually from Pittsburgh, believe it or not. He's from Pittsburgh. Oh. Yeah, he's from Pittsburgh, but he spent most of his life, out in California, doing session work, particularly for the likes of Mitchell and a couple other 70s artists. His most famous track, I would say, as a drummer, is actually from the early 80s, which is Edge of 17 by one Stevie Nicks. He played drums on that as well.
Russ Kunkel, what a legend. What a man.
You're not going to get any disagreement from me.
But getting back to Joni Mitchell here and Carey, this is strictly a vibes kind of song, and I'm absolutely all here for it. Joni's vocals are, again, top notch. Like, there's never going to be a point in this album that I'm ever going to say anything at all that's going to be less than perfect about Mitchell's vocals. But yeah, I feel like the more I'm thinking about this, and I didn't catch it on my first listening of All I Want, but I kind of caught it on my multiple spins of this album. I feel like Carey and All I Want kind of have the same kind of vibe. It's like a nice beach feel. It almost kind of I don't want to call it some sort of reggae vibes, but it kind of has a nice little chill vibes, and yeah, I think I said vibes 7 times in that little tangent there. But yeah, this is essentially what this song is. Not much else I can say about it. I mean, there's some good lyrics here that basically illustrate Joni's ability to really paint an excellent picture. But yeah, probably not one of the strongest songs off the album, but that's not a knock off of it. Sometimes you just need a vibes kind of feel song.
Yeah, I agree. But I will add some context to it because much like Little Green, this song is also based on a real person. A person by the name of Carey Raditz, who lived in California, was basically the ultimate hippie. So when she I mentioned Girls Like Us, there's actually a picture of Mitchell with Carey in the book, if you get it, where she is seen, sort of in the mountainside, out in the woods with this guy who, I guess they had a brief fling or whatever you call it for a hot second. And so when she says, Carey, get out your cane, it's basically a walking stick. So this guy is just, basically, a mountain man in the woods, just sort of living off the land. And she, digs it. She digs it. And one thing I'll mention about the vocals in this song, I mean, I agree with you that they are very good because it's all her. She's the only vocalist on this entire album. Even with the help from the likes of distinguished vocalists like Stephen Stills and James Taylor, she is the only vocalist on this album. And the way she flips the vocal phrases throughout the choruses that pass by, you notice it's not a complete call and response on the second and third chorus. The rhythm is different, and why she did that, I don't know. And why she did that, I don't care. I dig it. It is creative, and it sort of connects every part of the song without actually having to connect it, which is a neat little trick. So I do like this song a lot. I'd probably put it in my top half of the album. And yeah, it's just a nice upbeat track. Although I would not say the most rhythmic track on the album. Will get there.
Oh, okay. I'm curious to see. Like, there's maybe one other song that I can see that could be maybe more rhythmic, but I could be completely wrong. Again, I'm a Joni Mitchell novice here. I'm not like a Russ Kunkel, like, being like a manly man who knows all about Joni Mitchell and, like, is walking on a stick while, like, anyway. I don't know why I've gone on about Russ Kunkel.
I don't know either. I'm really curious as to why you have decided to just jump into this admiration of this man on the same level as Joni Mitchell.
Anyways, but yeah, like, not much else that could be said about Carey here. All right, so we're gonna move on to the title track, "Blue."
Yes, "Blue," which is the title track, and it's a very interesting song. It's definitely, I would say, the least structured song on the album. It doesn't really have most of the songs up to this point have had verses and choruses to some degree. This one doesn't. This one is about as free form as you can get. It's almost like a poem set to music. And it's hard to pinpoint what it's about. The general vibe is that it feels just kind of like we've talked in the past, particularly I think on the Kanye episode, or maybe a little bit on the Punisher episode, and definitely the Wilco episode, about songs that feel like they were recorded after a bad night of drinking and the feeling of being hungover. I would throw this in that category too, because it feels like and I don't know if she's talking about her hangover personally, or just the hangover of the entire hippie movement, because there's a line in this song where she's talking about, acid, booze, and ass, needles, guns, and grass, lots of laughs. They say hell's the hippest way to go. Well, I don't really think so, but I'm going to take a look around, though. Where she's realizing that this may not even be the utopia it's set out to be, but at the very least, it's something. And whenever the old phrase, when you have nothing to lose, you talk about Carey being vibes. I think this is even more vibes than that, just not good vibes.
Yeah. You nailed it right on the head, man. Like, I feel like, I don't know, Mitchell's intentions with this song was basically like trying to bring the audience into just the different kind of vices and different kind of feelings that we get about, like, just being alone and just being depressed and just that blue feeling. Like, something I noticed during the chorus that could speak to this, like, the phrase "lots of laughs." Like, it's so nice. Like, it kind of feels like whenever she's singing that in that kind of way, she's running out of gas. Like, it just seems like she's like. If she's waking up from a hangover after this, she's lost something. She's realizing that, hey, my life is not going in the direction that it needs to, and I don't know what I can do, like, to fix this. Not much else I can say about it, man. Like, it's an absolutely beautiful song. What is it? My favorite? No, that still goes to Little Grain. I wish Russ Kunkel was on Little Grain. That can, like, easily take it over the edge. But I digress. That beautiful man is not on that track.
No, he is not. The last thing I'll add about Blue is that it's sort of a theory I've had. Like, when we've had theories about albums before, about putting the other songs of the album, connecting them together. In the first two songs on this album, she's talking about how she wants a man to, get rid of her blues, or a lover per se. And this feels like a track that is dedicated to those feelings, to those blues. Saying, okay, I see you, I understand you, I don't like you, but you got me. And so here is what I have to say about that. And that's pretty much what this song is.
And even to add to that, like there's a song maybe four tracks down the road that could probably relate to this.
Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about, but we'll get there. As for now, we are going to, much like we did in the Zeppelin episode, go to California.
Oh hey. So yeah, California. Another kind of, I don't know, maybe not as like vibesy as like Carey, but this song basically, I don't know. We find the narrator or like Joni in a place where she's in one area of her life in Paris, but she really wishes, or it could be California. It's probably California. I don't know. I haven't really she's in one place, but she wants to be in another place. And like she's just reminiscing about this other place. Yeah, I mean, I like the song. There's a particular line where she talks about, I met a redneck on the Grecian Isle who did the goat dance very well. He gave me back my smile. And like when she delivers a line, but he kept my camera to sell. I love how she changes up her delivery. And like the way that her vocals pop during that chorus is instant perfection, man.
Oh yeah, I'm right there with you. Because not only is it sung well, it is sung honestly. And that, especially for the early 70s, or even just in general, even now, is not something you get a lot in music, where, the proficiency of the vocal from a objective musical perspective can also be matched by the subjective idea of, I'm a person and I'm trying to sing about my life. That sort of comes with the genuineness that a lot of people associate and still do with folk. So I agree with you. She nailed that line, and she nails the vocals once again on this song. It is very upbeat. It is definitely another example of escapism, it feels like, although perhaps her trying to deal with this escapism of, yeah, this is nice, but do I really want to stay here? Do I really want to be here in Paris, in Europe, when California is so much better to me? And maybe that has to do with the fact that she's used California as an escape from whatever upbringing she had to deal with growing up and not being the popular kid, and again, dealing with the things that we talked about in Little Green. So why escape from the escape? And I think that's kind of what this song's all about.
Yeah. All right, so you ready to get on this flight tonight?
I might be, and I'm not sure if Joni is.
Well, I mean, she might be able to, never mind. I was going to insert another Robert Krunkle reference there, but I feel like that, I've beaten that horse with a dead horse enough.
That horse is a deceased horse.
Shout out to Robert Krunkle. If you ever want to do a guest spot on this podcast, I don't know if you're still alive. If you are, God bless you. I love you.
Looking that up right now. Looking that up right now. Since we've gone this far down the rabbit hole, we might as well go full blown. See is Russ Kunkel still alive? Where is he? Russ Kunkel. He is, and he is 75 years old.
Heck yeah, man. Let's get Russ Krunkle on this podcast. This is no longer, hey, listen to this. This is Ross Krunkle, listen to this.
Hey, listen to Russ.
Anyways, shout out to Russ Krunkle, man. Alright, so this flight tonight, it's a really interesting song, man. Side note, I hope you maybe edit out the parts where I'm calling him Robert Krunkle. If you could do me a solid, that would be very much appreciated.
I'm sure I'll have to do a lot of fine combing in this episode, but yeah, I can deal with that.
All right. Anyway, so and take two. So this flight tonight. It's a really interesting song. It does kind of start out as like a same kind of vibey song, but if you listen to the lyrics, you get into a very juicy layer about like what's going on in it.
Yeah, you do, and it's weird. It's just weird on its own with how it sounds, because I mentioned how Carey might have been the most percussive or most upbeat song on the record, but not the most percussive. This one I think is, because it just from a few guitars creates this almost acoustic metal type of sound, where it almost has like I wouldn't go as far as calling it funk, but definitely polyrhythmic, and definitely probably the weirdest sounding song on the album by far, which is saying something. But the guitars are very grungy or early grunge. The key is a little different. It's not. It's a very dark and twisted key, like something you would hear maybe from like a Marilyn Manson almost, or a Black Sabbath. It's definitely the vibes on this one are not one that you would expect on any song, period, let alone this one. And furthermore, the vocals aren't necessarily, I mean, her vocals do nail it, but it's definitely a little bit more hectic and hushed than they are. There's no high notes. There's, going for the Mariah Carey note on this one. A lot of it just feels a lot more frantic than it does on other tracks.
Which goes into like her state of mind at this point of the album, because the way that I was able to take away from this specific song, this is basically Joni getting on a flight after she walks out on her man, and like she's talking about drinking sweet champagne. She got her headphones up high. She can't numb the thoughts of this person out. Can't drum him out of her mind. The way that the song changes up during like the part that the lyric reads, they're playing goodbye baby goodbye, oh love is blind, like, oh my goodness, like I love that, and it really does play into the mindset of like somebody who's actually having a for lack of a better term, a mental breakdown during like this point in her life.
Exactly, and we'll get to the contrast of that in a little bit. But it's very much a turning point in her, or in sort of the story that's being created on this album. This is the point of the story where it's like, okay, I have to make a decision. What decision do I want to make? And for a decision like a breakup and like moving on from this part of your life, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And the way it is conveyed is dead on. It really is dead on. It's frantic. It's very of the moment, it feels. Again, I could ramble on about the frantic nature of this song, but I just think it takes a situation like that, a very isolated situation, trying to make a decision in the moment, the franticness of trying to make a decision in the moment, and just nails it.
You know what I was just thinking of, and I'm trying to vamp right now so I can pull up that specific track comparison. But so when we were talking about Exile and Guyville here, I think the song that I'm thinking of and is like particular from that album, it could be completely wrong.
Are you talking about the song
Stratford,
Yeah, Stratford on Guy. I was thinking the same thing. You mentioned that because I think when you compare the two, I think they both do a good job of explaining, certain parts of being on a flight, but from different perspectives and for different reasons, I think.
Yeah. I'm more likely to side with Joni on this. Not that it's a fight between like Joni and Liz Phair, but like the way that she's able to really like paint an excellent picture of her mindset during this time. Like, I give her flowers, and if I can take maybe a step back, and I don't I don't know, maybe I feel a little bit bad about bashing Liz Phair as much as I did, but Um, like a lot of the like again, this specific album is not 18 tracks long, and that might have been my main gripe against Exile and Guyville, but. There's a lot of the same vibes in this one, but Joni's vocals and the way she's able to like paint a picture easily make any concerns I have about like everything being the same vibes not being that big of a concern. But I digress. This is not a Liz Fair. I'm sorry that I gave it a 5 out of 10. This is a Joni Mitchell Blue album review, and maybe a love letter to Russ Kunkel. But yeah, do you have anything else to add about this specific track, This Flight Tonight?
Not necessarily. I do just want to, I think, possibly give a shout out if I could, assuming I'm right on this, which I think I am, on this song. Hey, hold on, let me see. I'll let this part out later. Here we are. Nope, not wrong one. Because on this track, actually, let me see. There we go. A man by the name of Sneaky Pete Kleinow. He played pedal steel guitar on both this track and the previous track, California. And he is the fifth and final person associated with this album, aside from James Taylor, Russ Kunkel, and Stephen Stills.
Man. All right, Sneaky Pete, what a man.
Yeah, he's a he played on I think a few of the Flying Burrito Brothers albums, which feature Graham Parsons, which we may visit down the road. But yeah, a very small group of musicians. And talking about your boy Russ Kunkel, the one thing about this album is that even though there were a few songs where it's listed he's the drummer, I don't think I hear a snare drum on this entire record. Not that that's a bad thing, but something that is, for those who are expecting, bops or stuff you can shake your ass to, a bit of a warning, because it's not there.
Oh, also, I think you just swore for the first time in the podcast history, so you dropped the first curse word. Yeah! Heck yeah!
It's a PG word.
It's still a curse word, though.
All right,
I don't know.
Fine. Since I'm editing, I'll take care of it later. Fine.
No, you can leave it in. I'm pretty sure, I've alluded to worse things in this episode. Not this episode, but this podcast as a whole. But yeah. Anyways, you ready to go on down the river? All right. So River. This is apparently a very big song that has escaped my ears and just my general existence as a music lover. I've never heard River up until this point.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, for those of you who are like, what is a river? First of all, what? Second of all, so River, once you decide to hit play on that or drop the needle on it if you own the vinyl, so it has a Christmassy kind of vibe to it, man. When the piano kicks off, there's a Jingle Bells riff on it that I was just like, oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how the song starts. And, I'm just going to come out and say it. This is my favorite song on the album. And I think it's one of the best songs ever. Any top 500 list should have this song on it at some point. This is how good this song is. Because you mentioned the riff. And then it gets into the lyrics about how, it's coming on Christmas time. And she wants to, skate away on a river. And what's amazing about this song is that I've heard it before. I've listened to this album before, and then it stood out as a track before to me, and I'd listened to it. But on this last set of listens I've given to it, it stood out so much more because I've listened to the lyrics, and in the context of the entire album, it's perfect. It is beyond perfect, because it paints a picture. You can very easily see her playing this in a piano in a cabin in the woods with snow falling outside, her going out onto a body of water and skating. But at first, when I hear that, I'm thinking, oh, she wants to go out to, like, a lake or something and, skate and, sort of, very Charlie Brown-esque type of portrait, very Norman Rockwell, if you will. But then when I started thinking about it, she's not talking about a lake. She's talking about a river. And that's a huge difference, because we've been talking about, particularly on California, on All I Want, the escapism that she wants in this album, and how the ultimate escape is just learning how to fly from the river on ice skates and teaching her feet to fly. So basically, I don't want to even be a part of this world anymore. I want to escape. I want to defy physics and escape. And the reasons she goes into in regards to saying that, why she wants to, particularly talking about, being in love earlier on My Old Man and All I Want, and on even Carey, that is, when you put that together with this song, it really just sort of brings everything together all at once. It's a very confessional song. It's a rather heartbreaking song, and I know you were probably going to say it, but I'll beat you to it. The vocals on this track... Yes!
Table slap! Shout out to my wife with that. The whole concept of a table slap. Let's just say it's like a thing that her and her coworkers come up with whenever there's somebody that attractive that comes by her place of work. They slap a table.
I did not know that, but that is a rather appropriate anecdote. But that is just that level of yes, just absolutely all. Like I talked about how with Punisher there wasn't really a song on there that maybe said yes, I want all of this right now. River is that song. It is a beautiful song, beautifully sung, beautifully performed. Which, by the way, and we'll talk about this a little later, but Joni Mitchell is really good at piano too. It should also be said. The jazzy interlude that incorporates Jingle Bells without fully going full into Jingle Bells. Just, it is a perfect song that I cannot accolade enough.
I absolutely agree. Like the only thing that I will add, like, just as a nice little, like, cherry and, like, little garnish on top, like, whenever she's talking about, like, wanting to, like, go down this river and, like, fly away, like, the way that her vocals kind of, like, trail off, and it almost seems like she's literally just, like, escaping, like, that's a nice little touch, man. Like, absolutely an excellent song. And like, it's funny how this comes off of after this flight tonight, because you go from, like, a mindset of, like, oh, hey, like, I'm mentally breaking down. I just walked out of a relationship, and I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, I need to get out. And, like, River, like, it seems like she's coming to terms with, like, hey, like, this is my life now, and I want to escape. I just want to leave. And even in taking a step back, like, whenever we first started talking about this album, we talked about the fact that there's multiple different ways that you can take the lyrics and, like, the point of view of this. Like, this could be either a very straightforward, this is her talking about a guy in a relationship that she's, like, escaping with. But on the other end, this could be her being like, hey, I want to escape fame, notoriety, or hey, I want to escape modern day. Like, the fact that she's able to layer, and, like, us as listeners can really take different meanings out of it, gives Joni, like, that much more credit as an excellent songwriter, that she's able to construct such a beautiful art of work that is River, and, like, this album as a whole.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I'm glad you mentioned that there could be that feeling of wanting to escape from everything, not just the relationship or lack thereof, but that it could be escaping from this public persona that comes with that, because especially in the last 20 years and 30 years so, speaking in 2023, you cannot be a famous person in a relationship without people just being completely up your nose and wondering about every single little thing that you do. And the fact that Joni had these anxieties in 1970, 1971 is rather striking. But again, I this is easily my favorite song on the album. It's easily my favorite Joni Mitchell song, and I really don't have much more to say about it other than that.
You know, if I could take a brief pause here, I'm gonna look up our release schedule. Um, yeah, this is gonna be released December 23rd, a couple days before Christmas. So, like, hey, this is our Christmas episode, everybody!
Yay!
Yeah, Christmas! Ross Crunkle! But yeah, what an appropriate album to talk about. But yeah, I have nothing else to say about River. Do you have anything else to add before we move on to A Case of You?
No, let's go ahead.
All right, so A Case of You, another great track off of the album. This it starts out with very bare instrumentations. Joni's vocals again are absolutely amazing, but I love how the song progresses. You get more and more and more layers of instruments. It really, this is her almost kind of flexing her compositional muscles in terms of just you keep adding a different layer after so long. So that's an excellent way to start out the song.
Agreed. And this is the only time on the album where I've been kind of wrestling with the idea of something being off, not in a musical sense. I agree with you that the song is good. No notes wouldn't change too much of anything at all. My only thing is narratively, or narratively, whatever you want to use. The fact that this song comes after River, sort of after the broken relationship, and especially considering the song that's coming up, it feels almost like it's a song that fits in with All I Want or Carey. Something that maybe it could have been better suited on the first half of the album. But thinking about it again, I'm not so sure I believe myself there. Because this doesn't seem so much as, or rather it could be seen as her taking another crack at it, starting all over again in a new relationship, saying, I want a case of you, and, I'm obsessed with you, and this is her trying, her luck with another man in this case, and how, the fact that she's comparing it to, getting drunk and being so sort of caring or careless and free-willing is maybe just, again, a bit of, sort of desperation and escape compared to the joyous escape that we heard earlier in the likes of Carey and All I Want. Aside from that, again, the lyrics are fantastic. It's very vibey, as you say, and again, it's just a really good song talking about romance. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah. How much? I kind of took it in a different lens here, and I feel like A Case of You, it really is the prelude to the final track off the album, Last Time I Saw Richard, and so we go from her having a manic breakdown in This Flight Tonight to River, where she's basically coming to terms with hey, no, I just want to escape and I'm at peace with this. I feel like this is her just looking back on the relationship and just realize, hey, this person had an impact on me, and maybe looking at it from a rose-colored tint, especially with lyrics of love is touching souls, surely you touch mine, 'cause part of yours poured out of mine, and in these lines from time to time, the excellent lines there. Yeah, again, this is maybe her just making, like, starting to come to terms with peace with about the relationship as a whole.
Yeah, I can agree to that. This is her basically saying, you know, it sucks that it's over, but it was good while it lasted. And, maybe her saying, even though I regret how it ended, I don't regret the fact that it happened. Which I'm pretty sure is either was or would become a Dr. Seuss line later on, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened, which, is not necessarily as kid-friendly as this particular album is, but at the same time, you do bring up a good point that maybe this is just her coping with it, or even possibly regretting that this person she couldn't get enough of isn't in her life anymore, or that perhaps the romance that came with it is not a part of her life at this point, and then she wants that back.
Yeah, and I feel like this is excellently, really shown in the last track here. The last time I saw Richard. So are you ready to wrap this album up here? So we talk about, her making peace and, just coming to terms with it. I feel like the last time I saw Richard really, expands upon that concept, man. This is another piano song. Excellent piano intro there. Joni's vocals are amazing, as I've said throughout this whole episode. It's up there with Russ Krunkle in terms of being a legend in this album here. Matt is gonna be well, I'm never gonna say that guy's name ever again.
I'm not gonna be able to hear it without laughing, so thank you for that.
You're welcome, man. You're welcome. But no, her, this really, in this song specifically, the set of lyrics that I'm gonna zero in on, really show Joni's ability just to really tell a story here, in terms of multiple layers. So, the lyric that I'm going to zero in on is he put a quarter in the jukebox, whatever it's called. He pushed 3 buttons and the thing began to whir. And a barmaid came by in fishnet stockings and a bow tie. And she said, "Drink up now. It's getting time to close." "Richard, you haven't changed." I said, "It's just that you're romanticizing some pain that's in your head." And this is basically, there's other things I can talk about, with this specific lyric set here, but it's really showing that, hey, whenever this barmaid comes up and says, "Hey, drink up, it's getting time to close," it's not talking about, hey, bar time. You could maybe go from, hey, this is really just a straightforward, recollection, song, but the way I take it, this is her basically saying, hey, enjoy life now, because it's not gonna last forever. The good times are not gonna roll. There's gonna be this is gonna be a fleeting moment. And yeah, I don't know what else to say other than that set of lyrics and the way that this song basically draws everything to a conclusion is an excellent way to draw everything to a close, man.
I agree with your sentiment of it being a great album closer. I take the interpretation of the song to be a little different. To me, this is Joni, I think, using a character or perhaps another real-life person that she knows in a context to challenge herself, or at the very least acknowledge that the way she sees the world is not the only way the world is seen. Because this Richard guy, and I'll zero in on some lyrics myself, further on down the line, which is, Richard got married to a figure skater, and he bought her a dishwasher and a coffee percolator, and he drinks at home now most nights with the TV on, and all the house lights left up bright. To me, that is the domesticity, the true middle class domestic life that is so far removed from anything that Joni's been talking about in this album. And also how Richard basically says, all these, going back earlier in the song where he says, "You think you're immune, go look at your eyes, they're full of moon. You like roses and kisses and pretty men to tell you all those pretty lies, pretty lies." Basically, she is either creating Richard or knows Richard as someone who sees her romanticism that she talks about, whether it's in love gained or love lost as a bunch of hokey pokey nonsense. And for her to acknowledge this in song and for her to put this out there saying, I might be wrong about all of this, is very powerful. Because that is a level of self-realization that a lot of artists don't go into, and a lot of people ultimately don't go into when they examine who they are and what they're about.
Yeah. All right. So that's the album, man.
Yeah, it is the album.
All right. So I'm going to let you go first in terms of like ratings and next album recommendations.
Okay, yeah, I will start, and not surprisingly, this is going to be my first 10 on this show.
What? Is it because of Russ Krunkle?
It is, well, he is part of it, so I guess technically it kind of is. But no. The reason I'm giving this a 10 is because the way Jack Holtzman, who is the founder of Elektra Records, he talked about this in regards to the Doors' first album in a documentary I saw about that. He said it's a perfect album in that you wouldn't want to change a single thing about it. And in this case, that's exactly the case with Blue here. Every song is fantastic. The vocals are perfect. The instrumentation is perfect. The tone that it sets is perfect. The lyrics are fantastic. I mean, even if you take the standouts like The Last Time I Saw Richard or River or Little Green, you know, on their own, they'd be great. But as a whole, it becomes even more than that. I really can't say anything other than this is and again, too, not only is it because of the power of lyrics that are in there, but just how she's able to do so much with so little. You know, like a lot of great songs, you know, have like, you know, string attachments to it, or, you know, hundreds of musicians and vocalists. Again, five people, excuse me, including Mitchell herself, are on this album. And for the majority of the songs, it's just her with one instrument. And maybe some overdubs. That's it. And for it to come out as powerful as it is really just a masterpiece in not just folk music, but music as a whole. 10 out of 10.
All right, so I guess this is a part of the podcast where I break Matt's heart and rate this a 1 out of 10.
Yeah, all right. remove that.
Like, for those
remove that decimal from the 1.0. Remove that decimal from the 1.0.
And like, for those of you who are hearing in the background, my dog has started to bark, and he's probably like, you know what? You're full of crap. You're full of crap, man. Now, honestly, man, like, I know I've given out 2 other 10s in this podcast before, but like, this is an easy 10 out of 10 for me too. Like, there is nothing I can say about this album that I could be like, maybe this could have been a little bit better, or maybe doesn't connect with me. Like, the only thing that I can say about this album that could maybe, like, at first maybe hold it back from being on 10 out of 10 is I've not lived with this album nearly enough. But in my head, that's not a very valid reason from holding it back from being a 10 out of 10. Because if you listen to something long enough, like multiple listens, and you recognize it for its musical genius and the way that it's just such an amazing piece of art, like, it deserves its roses. Like, there's, like, this album as a whole does really spell out, like, you know, the mindset of somebody who is just, like, going through life, being an independent person, and then falling in love and dealing with the after effects of it. Like, the fact that, like, even in, like, in many instances in her life, like, specifically, like, Little Green, how she's able to, like, basically bleed onto the page and really tell an excellent story. Like, holy cow, man. Like, and, like, like, I don't know, like, there's so many other things I can say about this album that make it such a fantastic listen, but easy 10 out of 10 for me, man. This is the album that Liz Phair wishes she could have made. Maybe she was inspired, but yeah, I digress. I'm not going to slam Liz Phair. This is Joni Mitchell's time. 10 out of 10, Joni Mitchell Blue.
Absolutely. Now, as far as the next album I would recommend, it is another Joni Mitchell album, and it's also very good, and it has some great songs on it, but it's very different in that it does become a bit more, I wouldn't say conventional, but definitely a lot more fuller in sound. There's a lot more instruments on this, and a lot more of a sort of traditional pop or rock feel, and that's her 1974 album, Court and Spark, which there may be one song you might be familiar with, which is her top 10 hit, or only top 10 hit, which is Help Me, which is on that album. It's a little jazzier, it's a bit more soul-influenced, but it definitely does have a lot of personal, introspective lyrics, and that would be the recommendation. I would try to recommend For the Roses, which is her next album after Blue, before Court and Spark, but I have not listened to it, so I can't in good faith actually do that. So Court and Spark would be my recommendation.
Okay. I'll maybe have to check it out, because, me and Joni Mitchell's vocals and just everything here. So my next album recommendation, it's going to be an album by the artist Julian Baker. It's going to be her 2017 album, Turn Out the Lights. American singer-songwriter, again, an artist that's basically bare in terms of like her instrumentation, how like she just really connects with the audience. Excellent vocals, and yeah, easily probably is a student of Joni Mitchell in terms of like how she's able to portray her life honestly and like bleed onto the page. And guess what, Matt?
What?
That's going to be our next episode. This is where we're going to go next. We're going to go on to Turn Out the Lights by Julian Baker.
I look forward to it, because if you're recommending that off what we just heard, that puts it in a... I mean, no pressure, Julian. You're going up against a 10 out of 10 here.
But yeah, anything else you want to add about this album, Joni Mitchell as a whole, Russ Kunkel, anything at all? Even like, what you had for breakfast this morning?
No, not really. Again, I viciously recommend taking a listen to this album. Again, if you are into books or autobiographies, Girls Like Us, in regards to Joni Mitchell, along with Carly Simon and Carole King, where a lot of details about these songs lie, and about the making of this album too. And not just to mention a lot of talk about Joni's mental state at the time. A very recommended read. Also, if you like this episode, and I would imagine if you're all the way into episode, I think this is number 11 this is. If you already made it to this point, you probably do like us, but if you're just discovering us for the first time, because you may not like Led Zeppelin, but you like Joni Mitchell, feel free to check out our episodes on all platforms. Give us a like, give us a review, what we did good, what we could do better, why Ryan needs to lay off Russ Kunkel. All that kind of recommendation is welcome.
Yeah. Again, thank you for listening to this episode of Hey Listen to This. Like Matt said, follow us, review us, give us a 5 out of 5. Tell everyone how much Russ Kunkel is such a legend. And if you're looking to follow us on other social media platforms, the tagline is TT Hey Listen. If you are looking to write to us directly, we do have a mailbag that is ttheylisten@gmail.com. And next week we're going to be talking about Turn Out the Lights by Julian Baker. So if you have not listened to that album, I highly recommend you listen to that album. One, if you like Joni Mitchell's Blue, but two, in order to get context for the episode that's coming up next. But for the last time for this episode, I am Ryan Kearns.
I'm Matt Durzik, and on next week's episode, we turn out the lights on 2023.
I see what you did there.